Welcome to Living Low Sodium with Mary Schepp. Join Mary as she tickles your taste buds with her salty wit and her exceptional palate, all whilst guiding us through the land of low sodium living. Brought to you in part by the support of Reeses Barkery and Pawtique. ReesesBarkery.com, 815-363-7297. Why? Because your fur babies need to eat well too. Today is part 3 of The Power of Food, and we welcome in our special guest, Wanda Farm. That's not a person's name, it's the name of the farm.
Kind of, a little bit of both. Joe
Both,
Wanda from
yeah.
Wanda's Farm. So it's his family farm that's here. So anybody that watches the show, follows me even remotely, knows that I always loved food, loved farmers markets. I didn't get really heavily into farmers markets until after my liver failed and started eating better and trying to find better foods, and discovered that at the time, and this was only in 2015, that grocery stores, all of the poultry and fowl, chicken, turkey, everything is brined. Pork, it's all brined. So when I got sent home from the hospital and they said, here's a chicken recipe, which wasn't really a recipe, it was a 2-page document that said, grill some chicken and put Mrs. Dash on it. It's not really a recipe. So I said, okay, go to the grocery store. And I look at the package, and a few of the people that I had met, Gwen being one of them, instilled in me, said, you always got to read the label. Doesn't matter what you're buying, you got to read the label. So I see 10% solution. I'm like, well, what's this? What solution is in chicken? Did my research. I love cooking. I'm a foodie. So I knew what a brine was. Come to find out that my 45 to 80 milligram per serving chicken is now 300 to 1,000 milligrams per serving because someone put salt in it, because most people don't know how to cook properly. So if they brine it, they're not going to have crappy chicken, which means they don't have crappy reviews. It lasts longer on the shelf, yada, yada, yada. So then I had to find pork and poultry that I could eat because I couldn't find it at the grocery store. It's a little bit easier to find regular chicken. You still cannot find pork or turkey at a grocery store. That even at Thanksgiving, we got 20,000 people in our low sodium group, and you'll see them post, and I found it here, I found it here, I found it here, because a grocery store will order 10 unbrined chickens, and the rest of them are all brined, so we can't eat them.
And that was news for me. I learned about that last week from you. I had no idea that they brine chicken.
Correct.
Like, I never would have even thought of that.
So people give big box stores, and I mean like the Costco's and Sam's Club, they would give me grief because I would get my pork and my poultry there. Well, the reason I did that is because restaurants get their pork and their poultry there. So restaurants, if it's a good restaurant, they don't want to buy pre-brined or because that's what it is. It's pre-seasoned. They want to do it themselves. So you can go to Sam's Club or these big box stores and a lot of times get pork or something packaged from the slaughterhouses and it doesn't have a brine in it. So that was my first option. And then I started learning about farms. And then the pandemic hit. And that's when the farm group was created. Because I'm a foodie and I grew up in McCollum Lake. And up the street from McCollum Lake, on McCollum Lake Road, was King's Farm. When I was little, that was all that was there. There was no Walmart. Downtown McHenry was downtown McHenry by the theater. That where all of that stuff is now on Johnsburg Road and all up there, other than the Moose Lodge, nothing was there. My neighbor would go to King's Farm every Sunday and get milk, and we would go back to her house, and I would bake bread with my neighbor. So the naivety is that as an adult, you just assume that's everybody's childhood. Like, you grew up around farms, so you just assume until you're adult and go, what do you mean you've never been around a cow or you've never been around a chicken? And you realize that wasn't somebody else's reality. So when the pandemic hit, and I literally, a friend of mine lives blocks away. She's got hundreds of chickens. So can I buy some eggs? I couldn't find any at the grocery store. Sure, come on over. She delivered them to my front door. No big deal. And I had 80 messages in one day because I was still posting pictures of food. Where'd you find meat? Where'd you find eggs? So I went to the farm.
Yeah.
Created the group, and it literally exploded in 3 days. Almost all of our membership was in the first week, which is how I met you. But that pandemic is where my husband and I had talked about it for years, like a decade, about I want to buy and stock my fridge. So we've had the conversation, let's buy a freezer, never did it. Pandemic hits. The house that we moved into, the beginning of the pandemic, lo and behold, they said, do you want the freezer? It's in the basement. Sure. So I have a freezer. It's empty. Why not? So that's when we bought beef from me. And the funny thing is when I first started researching it, if it wasn't for the fact that somebody backed out of their purchase, everybody was booked.
Yeah.
Everything was sold.
Well, it was crazy that pandemic time when you created the group.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I can't even remember how I got connected with it. I don't know if you reached out to me or what happened or somebody tagged me.
Right.
But anyhow, we got in the group and I was posting. I'm like, yeah, we have beef and everything. And that was literally, I think the week before that, I sent out the email to my normal customers saying, hey, we're taking pre-orders on all of our bulk beef and pork this year. You better get your orders in quick. And years past, people always just take their sweet time.
Yep.
No concern. And a lot of my customers were still taking their time. Some of them were really quick, but then I posted it in your
it's
group,
gone.
and like I'm getting order after order, and now I'm calling all of my customers saying, listen, this is going to be sold out tomorrow.
Yeah.
If you do not tell me today that you want it or not. And everybody was like, oh yeah, get me on the list. And so it was crazy. I think we sold like our year's worth of beef and pork.
And that was across the board.
Literally 3 days.
And so that's the irony is the amount of people that ask me, where's your farm? I don't have a farm. I live in Fox River Grove. I can't even have a chicken. Like I mean, I've joked that I could actually register it as a therapy chicken, and then I could have a chicken, which I think is, I could get a cow. If I registered it as a therapy animal, I could have whatever I want on my property. But I can't even have a farm. But because I knew this connection that there's 800 registered farms just in McHenry County. And those are just the farms that are registered. That's not like I'm allowed to have chickens or a goat or whatever. So I have it and I do this kind of stuff on the side and I make, goat milk and cheese and whatever. That's the registered agricultural farms in McHenry County.
That's probably mostly grain farmers.
Right. They're not. And so it was so shocking to me how many people didn't realize how I'm like, you at a bare minimum, you've had to have been pissed off and stuck behind a combine at some point in McHenry County, all over the place, every spring. Like, how do you not know that we have this huge farming community right here? So you're not alone. The amount of messages that I got after I created the farm group of people messaging me that they sold out for the first time in the history of their farm. I have a friend of mine. She's got a farm stand. She literally just has this little stand on the front side of her road. She sells garden plants. And now she's back to what she had done years ago, where she's got multiple greenhouses, almost like a full-fledged Home Depot, because you can buy, I get my tomato plants and pepper plants and all that from her. They're like $2 instead of however much you pay at Home Depot or whatever with all the garbage on them. But the best part, there's two parts. One is the amount of farmers that have reached out to say thank you for bringing the people to their farms. But turning my husband into a snob over these products is just, I remember one day that I just didn't, this was before I had bought, I think I had already placed the order, but I hadn't gotten the order of beef from you yet. And we had farm fresh steaks, and I just picked some up at Jewel, and he's like, is there were these what's the date on these? Were these bad? I'm like, no, they're like, he literally was stocking the cabinet when I was standing there. So, I mean, they're not even the pre-wrapped stuff over here. I actually went to the butcher counter as he was cutting them, but it's still Jewel. He's like, they just don't, I don't know. He's like, they don't taste bad. They don't taste off.
I remember this. You made
right.
like a post on Facebook.
Right.
You're like, oh my gosh.
Right.
I can't stand this store-bought beef anymore. I have got to start buying from the farm. It's so much better.
Right. And so then it became this thing where anytime I had the last one was I used ribeyes from you to make bulgogi. And bulgogi is just like an Asian, almost like a beef and broccoli.
Okay.
It's just super thin sliced, Asian flavored with, soy sauce and pear and over rice. But he's like, you're going to use a ribeye for that? Yeah, I am. Because I got 150 pounds of beef in my freezer. So it doesn't matter because the ground beef cost me the same as the ribeye. So it's not like I went to Jewel and paid $29.99 a pound for this ribeye and then come home and say, I don't care if I cook it because it's garbage meat.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. He's like, how come you don't make for this? I just never made bulgogi with really good beef before. So that's why it was amazing. But it's funny because now I even made chicken one day, fresh from the farm, just cut in half birds, frozen solid. But because birds from the farm are so much smaller than the grocery store ones, right in the oven in a cast iron pan with a bunch of broth. I'm like, I don't even care if they overcook because I'm just tired and I don't want to do anything. So I just threw it in the oven, let it cook for like 2 hours. And both of us expected it to be, overcooked, dry, whatever, garbage chicken because I cooked it from frozen. And it was still amazing. The difference between what you get from a farm, all the way from a tomato all the way to the cow, is just night and day. I don't think people understand or comprehend how long something like a tomato takes to get from the vine to your table if it's not from a farm here in your county.
Yeah. No, I actually never really ate chicken until, let's see, I think it was about 5 years ago. We started raising some chickens on pasture for our farm, for ourselves. And that's when I finally started eating chicken on a regular basis.
Tastes different.
And absolutely. And now, I mean, it was interesting. Your guest last week was talking about the crock. I forget the name of it. Crockett.
Just Crockett.
Right? Just Crockett. And which is just awesome because we fall right in line with that, my wife and I, because we just crock like a lot of our food because it's so simple. Easy. And that's what we do. Usually once a week at least, we throw a chicken in the crock pot. It takes my wife 10 minutes to prepare it, and it just makes a great meal. And then she goes ahead and saves, we go ahead and we have what we want, and then we save the rest of the meat. And she'll go ahead and shred it, and then we'll make sandwiches out of it for lunch.
Tacos, burritos, sandwiches, anything you want.
And then she saves the bones, and she can make bone broth out of it. And it's like nothing goes to waste on it at all. So, yeah, absolutely. The chicken, if you've never had pasture-raised fresh chicken, like you're missing out. It's so much different.
So before we get too far, because we're going to talk a little bit more about the difference between fresh and commercially raised, and I've mentioned it quite a bit in our show over the years. But so how you have a family farm? How long have you had your farm?
Yeah, so I would consider a first generation farmer. So I grew up, my parents are from the city of Chicago. They moved out here to McHenry County, just outside of Hebron. They bought a little tiny, I don't know, I think it was 5-acre farmette.
Little hobby farm.
And and that's where, so they actually moved out when my mom was pregnant with me. So that was 1990. That was the year I was born. And
I just felt old. I see Kent peering over this computer over there.
Anyways, so so that's kind of how I got started. We just had some chickens. We had a big garden. My parents built a home on another property, and they upgraded to 27 acres. And on that allowed us to then get some livestock. So then we had a milking cow. We had a couple beef steers. We had a horse, some pigs. We kind of had everything. And that was basically how we got started. And I just fell in love with the lifestyle, waking up early, working with my mom, helping her with the chores. And I pretty much just kind of took control of it all. Probably by the time I was 12, 13, I was doing everything for my mom.
It definitely takes a different kind of person.
She wasn't really even involved that much And I was from a family of 6 kids. I was the middle child. Everybody else wanted nothing to do with the farm. They absolutely hated it. I will say the one thing I hated, though, I was not a gardener. I did not like playing in the dirt.
I like playing in the dirt.
And man, I think my I'll blame my parents on that, because they would send us out there to pick strawberries, and we'd be in the hot sun picking strawberries for 3 hours straight, and that was just the worst job ever.
And now people pay to do it on their own over at the big farm.
But anyways, that's where I got started. I knew I wanted to become a farmer, and so I actually worked for a dairy farm nearby, just outside of Hebron, milking cows for them every day in high school and in college, and I got a 4-year degree in agriculture, and then I worked for a large-scale dairy, even though now they're considered small today, because everything has just become so
massive,
big, these factory farms, and got a lot of experience there learning about animal husbandry for sure. And so that was a great experience. But, the commodity farming is so difficult for these family farms to survive, and they have no choice but to go big or go home, pretty much.
And then they get big enough, and someone buys them out because they're just big enough to be bought out and not big enough to fight it.
And that's what was happening.
Yeah.
All these small family farms. Like, I worked for about 3 small family farms from age 16 to 22. And 3 of those are no longer farming, and only the one. And honestly, part of the reason I left was because I just did not see the future in it. The finances were so difficult.
I can't even imagine.
And it was so stressful. And it wasn't and the route the farm was going towards, the mindset was, we just have to keep getting bigger. And I just started at that point. I read a book by Joel Salatin. I don't know if you've heard of him or not, but definitely look him up. Joel Salatin, Polyface Farms. And he's got a bunch of YouTube videos. You can kind of get lost in the weeds with him. But, he's got lots of books. I think the first one I read of his, I think it was Folks This Ain't Normal. And
I like the title.
I started listening to him, like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. Like, what are we doing? And
the more I've learned, and it's funny because I love the fact that, you see these stereotypes of, it's just a dumb farmer. And then you find out that so many of them aren't just dumb farmers. They're like you, that are college educated, knowledgeable people who know a lot more about these farms and the animals and the product and the effect on the environment and the economy of it, and all the way down the business structure. You forget that it's not just some idiot milking a cow. There's so much that goes into that kind of business structure. And at the same time, you literally are in the shadows of these behemoths. And the number one thing that is the debate, and that I get the most messages on in the group, is milk, because people don't realize that's almost like crude oil. The regulations behind, and the lobbyists way back when behind milk, and the amount to get one of those fancy milkers that you have to put on a cow, it's $100,000. And to get that and the cows and the regulations passed, and then you go, why aren't you selling your milk I can get it at Walmart for $1.99? Because I don't.
I mean, I felt so bad for these dairy farmers during that pandemic, because what happened was, like, for example, my sister has 5 kids, and at that time she still had her 5 kids, and she was going through 3 gallons a week, I think, maybe more. And they put a limit because of everything being taken off the shelf so fast. They put a limit on everything, and they were limiting how much milk you could buy. And now my sister and, other people that have large families that are going through a lot of food, they couldn't get their normal amount of food.
That's why the first thing that we did
And
was
meanwhile,
post about it.
the dairy farmers
Right.
I all know, they're telling me how they are dumping half of their milk
Right.
because the
They can't
plants
sell it.
can't take it.
Right. You can't. And that's, so it was funny. One of the first conversations that I had after we created the group was both on the milk and the beef side. And someone criticized me because I was buying pork from Sam's Club, which is, they buy theirs from Smithfield Pork. And this whole, where Smithfield gets their pork from and so on and so forth. And I'm going, I would buy it from one of my farmers, but the problem is my farmers can't get into the processors because the big people have the big processors because they have the big money. And then the little farmers with the little processors are driving 2, 3, 4 hours to get to a processing plant. And on top of that, they're not processing their animals until, I have a deposit now on pork for Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I even just the other day told my husband, you know what, we're at this point in our beef. I'm having Joe on the show today. That just reminded me I should start talking about ordering another round of beef for next spring, because he's like, really, you're going to do it? I said, yeah, I'm going to do it now, because chances are he's already sold what he's already got.
Yeah.
Come next, like you can't. But then they were talking the same thing where they're dumping all of this milk, and they're literally just calling off whole herds of animals, the whole house of their poultry, their beef, their pork.
Yeah, it was a horrible time. There was
Insane.
Hog farmers that were having to, and chicken farmers that were gassing all of their animals
because they couldn't process them.
And it was so sad. It was really a sad time. My heart went out to so many of these farmers, but I think sometimes these hard things, though, that happen are going to be a good thing down the road. And I just think people recognized that, holy cow, my food actually comes from a farm. It doesn't come from the grocery store, because they realized now all of a sudden there was an issue with getting the animal to the processor and the processor to the grocery store, because everything's shut down, and now people are freaking out that there's not any food out there. It was a scary time for a lot of people. It really was.
I had a conversation with someone about that process, and I said, you realize that when you have this wheel of industry, and it doesn't matter what you put on that wheel, if you're lucky and it's something like diapers, they can sit in a cargo truck for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. It doesn't matter. Holy crap, we forgot about this. Let's turn it on and sell it for super cheap. When you have live or expirable product, you can't just shut that wheel down. If you're sending this amount of animal to the processor on a regular basis, and now all of a sudden half their staff gets shut off, or their plant gets shut down, or whatever happens, you can't just store a herd of cattle for a year.
Yeah, and some farmers were able to do that. There's a little bit of room, but not a lot.
You can't just shut it off.
They were so backed out. But there was already like a need for more small local meat butchers, processors, and this pandemic just, oh my gosh, it just exposed that issue so much.
I think that in a bad way, during the pandemic, it opened everybody's eyes to some atrocities that happen at some of these processing plants, and the working conditions. But on a good side, that, like you said, with the need to have these smaller micro plants available to local farmers to create a sustainable effort in our communities, because like the food shed that's getting put up in Woodstock that supports local farmers, co-op, grocery stores.
We're excited about that.
Right. It's taken them a decade to get that store. I'm a shareholder in the food shed.
So are we.
And I'm not going to shop there. I don't live in Woodstock. I'm not going to drive. I might go visit there, but I supported it to support it because we need more of them.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, I'm a lazy ass. I'd rather pay you to deliver half a cow to me once a year. But those kinds of things, I think that it opened everybody's eyes to the fact that there is a way And there was an article that you actually wrote on your blog about how, and another thing that people complained about, especially a lot more during the pandemic, was the impact that large cattle herds have on the environment.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a one-sided story because it really depends on how you're raising those animals.
Exactly.
Because it's the same with poultry. You want poultry at $1.99 a pound, you guys need to Google it and look it up, and it's going to make you want to vomit because they're in high tunnels with no air conditioning, no fans, no nothing, no lights, and it's horrible conditions, but they're cage free because they're not in a cage. And you get those buzzwords. But the same with cattle.
No, it's very deceiving, the labeling that you see on how the animals are actually raised compared to what you see the pictures are on the labels. So it's unfortunate that people have to go to the grocery store and not have confidence in knowing
I'm the nut job.
How their food was actually raised. And so that's really kind of that. So going back to kind of how we got started with this, I was working on that dairy and just saw the future of it and really getting frustrated. And then meanwhile, started reading Joel Salatin, and then I got into the regenerative farming and started just gobbling up all of the information I could about it, and just was like, oh my gosh,
I love everything about that.
This is the answers. So these guys just broke it down and really made you start realizing how broken the system is with all of the subsidies and everything in the agriculture industry that just keep the commodity market going, and just realizing it's not a true economy that's going on. And these farmers just keep getting bailed out, which, rightly so. You don't want to see them go under business, but at the same time, we're just prolonging an issue. And so it just was eye-opening for me as I got exposed to more of that information. So definitely look up like Gabe Brown. He does a book called Dirt to Soil. And another book I read that was very impactful was by Michael Pollan, which was called The Omnivores Dilemma. And that book, oh my gosh, you want to talk about a good read. Like, he is amazing. And he talked about how our entire food system in the U.S. is built around corn. Everything we eat is corn. Everything. The animals' protein that you eat was derived from corn. All of the cereals were derived from corn. All the sugars are derived from corn syrup. It's just everything came from corn. And so it's an incredible book. You got to read that, viewers. If you have not, you'll really enjoy it.
I love being able to. I love when I find people that geek out over food as much as I do, because there's so many different. You geek out on it for a different reason than I do. It saved my life. Plain and simple. There's no two ways about it. My doctor is a great doctor. And I hate doctors. I do. And I did a whole show about how doctors suck. And they read a book and they said, here's 17 medications and a piece of paper with double-sided that says this is how much salt's in a teaspoon, or sodium's in a teaspoon of salt, and how to cook a piece of chicken. And I said, I'm an organ failure. It's got to be more complicated than that. And I was the poster child. So every single side effect that you can have from a medication, I had. And I told my doctor I want it off. And he legitimately laughed and then apologized and said, I don't mean to make you feel like you don't have a valid point, but we'll find a balance of your medications. But you got to understand, like, you're lucky you're alive and not on an organ transplant list. Your liver is dead. You don't have a choice. You have 3% of a functioning liver. If you want to survive, this is the path. We'll find a balance. And I said, I respectfully disagree because I'm a stubborn asshole. So let's try my way and see how it goes. And 6 months later, I was off all of my medication. And he says, you're an anomaly. I don't understand. They said, the girl that was in the hospital bed next to me died 6 months after I left. I mean, granted, she was further down the path and she had alcoholic issues and whatnot. So I never had an alcoholic problem, but I didn't not drink. We were young and whatever, and I didn't know I shouldn't have been. But finding out once I started down that path of not just being a food lover, of how much food affects your body and the difference. So I challenge people to buy your cheapo eggs at a grocery store. And even if they're the $7.99 eggs that are pasture raised eggs, because I'm telling you, if it says pasture raised or cage free or whatever like that on the box and you're paying $3 for it, it's not what you think it is. It's just not. But if you're paying $6 or $7, or especially at a grocery store, if you're paying $8 a dozen, it's probably a little bit closer to what you think is an actual pasture raised chicken.
Yeah.
But I challenge you to buy, if you can, because they're all over. Go in our group and you can find eggs every mile, everywhere. And crack a farm fresh egg. Not even the color. You don't even have to look at that. The shell on a farm egg is like bone. You want to see Turner and Hooch, the movie where Tom Hanks cracks the eggs for his girlfriend or whatever for breakfast, and then they all split in half perfectly one-handed. You can't do that with a grocery store egg because you crack it and the whole thing freaking crumbles because the eggshell is like tissue paper, because that's all the birds are raised for, is they're just egg production. That's it. And it's the same with the beef. They've actually started, we've only have another show we did on 100 years of food. Food science has only been researched for the last 100 years. But you go back to Egyptians and Japanese cultures, and they understood that how you had treated the animal affects it all the way through to the nutritional side of it. So they actually have tested, and you start seeing this research on like Wagyu beef. You tell me that it doesn't taste different and how you treat the animal, but yet you'll pay hundreds of dollars a pound because it says Wagyu on it, when the only difference between that cow and any other cow is the fact that it's loved. They brush them, they bathe them, they treat them fancy, they hug them, they snuggle them, and lo and behold, and they feed them until they're nice and fat, and the meat tastes amazing. So
yeah, I mean, I've actually had some Wagyu beef, and this farmer was talking all up and how great it was. And I had it, and I was like, you know what? I think my steak at home tastes just as good.
Right. I've had Wagyu.
I'm like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is a bad steak, but
No.
I'm just saying, like, it's
don't
overpriced.
Feed a farmer Wagyu, because it's and that is what's so funny. The first time, my husband has always said he's not a fan of ribeyes. And everybody loves ribeyes. So he's never been a fan of ribeyes. I'm like, well, you know what?
Does he like leaner meat then?
We always liked the strip. But and that's what we've always purchased. And it's not that we don't like the other cuts, but he just never was a big fan of the ribeye.
Wrapped with bacon?
Right.
See, I love the ribeye. That's my favorite. But that's
he does now.
My wife and I are opposites, and we do pair really well together with that.
Believe me, Ben and I are exact opposite.
I love the ribeye. I like the fat.
Yeah.
I will eat the
chunk
of fat.
Yeah.
My wife, she wants the leaner.
Yep.
She loves the filet. She'll eat the sirloin steak. That's her steak of choice. So
he does. Well, that's the funny thing is, I had told him, I said, I know you're not a big fan of ribeye, and he probably hadn't had a ribeye since his parents lived here and we went out somewhere for steak dinner. I said, but unfortunately, I've got half a cow in the freezer, and we're gonna run out of strip steak eventually. So we're gonna have ribeyes tonight, and you're just gonna have to deal with it. And of course, it's gone. He demolished it. This is amazing. I don't know why I said I didn't like ribeye. I'm like, because apparently it's not the ribeye that when you get it, it's weird because you don't think that there's different fat, but there's different fat.
Oh yeah.
And depending on there's so many different factors, but it really is different. There's a difference between the meat that I get from your farm, or the pork that I get from Dykstra's, or the birds or the poultry from like it is just flat out. It's the same fat globule that's always in a ribeye, but it's different.
Yeah.
It's not chewy. It's not.
Yeah, no, that was, I think, the other reason for us also, like, as I was learning about all this, like these guys I was following, they're all into more the regenerative farming movement, that the whole idea is we want to produce a more nutrient dense food that's going to be actually healthier and feed our body, because that's been the issue. Is now, as the farming industries have progressed over the years, we're depleting the soils of all the nutrients because we're killing all of the microorganisms with all of the chemicals and everything. And now we're finding, wait a minute, the nutrient content of the food today, it doesn't have the same content as it did 100 years ago. And it was just eye-opening when you start to learn that and realize that. And so that's the reason why we're doing more of a pasture-raised, multi-species farm model, because we recognize the symbiotic relationship that's happening there with the soil, the livestock.
It's funny how that works.
Everything just kind of, it's all a cycle. It all works together. And when you model that and how nature designed it to be, you don't need to be adding all these chemical fertilizers. You don't need to be spraying the fields. And you just kind of, it's, I don't want to say it's organic, but at the same time, I'm almost not even a fan of organic today anymore, because the issue
it's another buzzword
is I think when it started, it had good intent and it was a good idea, but then now it's just all of these large farms now that are really factory farms. I mean, you look at an organic, like I've seen some organic laying farms, like layers with the chickens.
Yeah.
It's literally, like you described, a big tunnel barn, and they have an opening, some doors on the side so the chickens can come out. And it's literally just a dirt lot.
Right.
Because there's like tens of thousands of those chickens, and they come out, and everything turns to mud in 2 days, and then it's just mud for the rest. And it's like, well, they're not really, and they don't even really come out much. Chickens actually don't like to go far away from their coop because that's where they feel safe.
Right.
So our model with our chickens is we actually move them every day to new pasture and force them to have new pasture. So it's not like they're in the same location forever. So,
believe me, I discovered the whole backyard chicken movement in our area because in our last house, I told my husband, I said I wanted guinea fowl because we had a tick problem.
Okay.
I'm like, I don't want a whole flock of birds. I don't want them for eggs. I want them because they will two of them will decimate the tick population in our backyard. That's all I want. Like, and we can't, and I get it, because if you don't, and here's the stupid thing, and it's really, really logical when it comes to whether or not you say people should have backyard chickens or not have backyard chickens. It's the same thing that I feel about people with dogs. If you're not going to care for your dog properly, you shouldn't have a dog. I don't care if it's a Chihuahua or a Pit Bull. Like you just shouldn't. And you shouldn't breed them, and you shouldn't, like, they can do the same thing. So if you're going to have chickens and you're not going to take care of them and you're not going to clean them, guess what? They're going to be dirty and they're going to be gross and they're going to be stinky. But that's just like anything else it doesn't matter what you have. You have too many cats. Guess what? Your house is going to smell like cat piss. Like, there's no two ways about it. So it was just funny to me how, I wish I could remember what it was. There was something that I watched years ago about what you can do with an acre of land. And because my husband and I, it was almost an acre, one of the properties we had. And even that, we had the smallest little garden, and it was still more than the two of us could consume. As it is now, we grow 2 tomato plants, a zucchini plant, and a habanero plant, and then I have a bucket about this big of herbs, and it's still more than the two of us can consume. So all summer long during the growing season, I don't have to buy tomatoes, zucchinis, or herbs.
Yeah.
And to think of what you can do with such a small little portion of land to be able to grow your own food is insane.
Well, just to put it in perspective, think back 100 years ago, what percentage of the
Right.
population you think were farmers?
Oh, that's the thing. Like,
What-
you don't have
take a
refrigerant.
guess,
It's
take a
got to be
guess.
at least 80%.
Okay, it wasn't quite that high 100 years ago. Probably a few hundred years ago it was, but it was about 50%.
That's crazy.
Today, what percentage of the population do you think are in the agriculture industry and farmers?
6.5.
I say 2%.
Yeah, it's about 1%.
Wow.
That's crazy.
1%. And the average age of these farmers are about 60 years old.
So that's the trend I've
So-
seen, is who's taken over their farms.
Right. So what's happening is all of these farms are just becoming bigger and bigger and large scale. And what you said, like, listen, I have this little garden.
Mhm.
It's more than enough food just for my husband and I. If we just got more, if we took responsibility in
Mhm.
raising more food for ourselves, how much money could people save?
Right.
Let alone also how much more, just less buying food from an industrial system and supporting that and just becoming more self-sufficient. So I'm all about, my belief is we need to see that number increase dramatically over the next 50 years. I really hope by the end of my lifetime that number goes up. I think farming is becoming, regenerative farming
Right.
is becoming a little more hot and cool, and I'm seeing more young people now getting into it, and they're getting excited about it. So
I was going to say,
really
I'm seeing the same
hopeful-
thing.
I'm really hopeful that we're going to see like a lot more smaller
Right.
family farms and less conglomeration for sure.
I think that, and I've been seeing a lot of the same thing, and it's funny that, you talk about the pandemic and all of these horrible things going on in the world right now, and there's a lot. There's never a dull moment. But I mean, you talk about being opposites. My husband and I could not be more polar. It's ridiculous. I'm like, hasn't left the house, like shut the windows, like monster house, grumpy old dude that yells at the kids that run across the lawn. And I'm in 6 networking groups and chambers and out doing all of this stuff and farmers markets and everything. And but it's this happy mix. But I have seen this interest. And I think that because of the pandemic opening a lot of people's eyes to the fact that there's a significant separation between, there's no middle. It's either this big giant farm that owns everything, or it's a little tiny mom and pop farm around the corner that works 6 different jobs trying to make it work.
Exactly.
Because they can't make money on their farm. I mean, I look at my farmers market people and I'm going, how?
They don't.
Like, I added this up in my head. You
guarantee-
made $100 today. How? You paid me $115 to be a part of my market. How did you make any money?
It's true. I guarantee you, all of these small farmers, they have another source of income. They're not making a living just from the farm. So I personally too, I also work off the farm still.
Mhm.
So when I got
farm
turned on to the
tours and-
regenerative farming, I left that previous farm I was working for, and that was back in 2017, I think, is when I left, and went back to working in my family business. And so that has been my source of income to allow us to pursue now this passion of like, hey, and then 2018 we bought our farm, and we've been just slowly growing it, and it's been it's been awesome, and it's been fun. So I think though you can make a living on it, but what we've had to learn over the last, we learned this hard the first couple of years, was charging grocery store prices and thinking you can compete with the grocery store. You'll never make any money.
No.
And that's when we got finally some coaching and found some people that are doing this full time.
Right.
And they've been able to really mentor us, and like, how do you actually build a sustainable regenerative farming business that you can make a living on.
And very early on when we created the farm group, because and it's funny because I almost got shunned by a few farmers who are now friends of mine, because they're like, who are you? Who are you with? Like, are you with the Farm Bureau? Like, what do you want? What's your purpose here? They wouldn't respond to me. They wouldn't talk to me. They're like, no, what do you, I don't know. I don't want to answer your questions. I want to know what's your game? And I'm going, I can't answer these questions for these people. I don't know. I'm not a farmer. And I'm tired of telling people, just go to a farm to get your freaking eggs. I don't sell eggs. Like, I just know people and I know where, so I'm never going to starve.
Yeah.
So as I started learning, and the amount, it was weird, the things that became these hot points in the group. And somebody would it was milk. Why can't, I want to sell milk. I want to make cheese. I want to buy milk. You have to know someone that sells milk. I'm not telling you, because the farmer can lose their farm. Like, they sell it. I have a whole list of them that you can go any time of day. So if I want fresh milk, I know exactly where to get it. But farmers are heavily regulated on what they can sell, how much they can sell, so on and so forth.
No, the raw milk.
The other is the price. So I'm like, when people would post in the group, and I'm sure you've seen me a couple times where I would shut it down, and we have a zero tolerance in the group. There's zero drama. You talk politics, you bash a farm, you bash another person. I don't care. I'm not going to warn you. You're out. That's it. There's no, and I get messages, well, let me back in. I don't care. You were a jerk. You're out. Because people would post, holy crap, what, $9 a pound for beef? Yeah. Sorry. It's for the whole cow. I mean, but yeah. And it's great. Try it. Like, you'll pay $30 for a steak.
Yeah.
But you're going to cry to me. So if you go to the grocery store now, grass-fed beef, or at least what they call grass-fed beef, is $9.99 a pound.
Yeah.
And your steaks are $30 a pound.
Yeah.
So I'm going, so in the very beginning, people are like, what do you mean, $6 a pound for a bird? Yep.
Yeah.
Well, they're $3. Then go to the grocery store. But if you want to support our local farmers, and you want something that tastes good.
Going back to what I was talking about with the nutrients content of the food, that's
it's so
really
different.
Exactly. I mean, the reality is, I'm not here to like serve everybody.
Right.
And if you are not sold on you're wanting to improve your health, you're wanting to improve the quality of the food you're consuming,
then you do you.
Then you're free to shop at Walmart or wherever to find the cheapest product. But the reality is, what we're producing, we feel like, is a superior product because it has more nutrient content. It's going to be a better tasting product. And you're also supporting a system that is a true economy. Again, going back to what I talked about.
And it's our economy.
Right. Going back to the corn and commodity market that's subsidized by the government. You're not buying the product at its true value, if that makes sense.
It does.
So if we stop and back up and think about this a little more, like when you're buying from a local farm, it's a true economy. They're not taking subsidies from the government to produce that product.
Right.
They're producing it at its cost. They're marking it up for them to make a living on. They're paying their local processor. And these processors, they're not getting rich. I can tell you that much. We have talked about opening up our own butcher plant.
It's an unforgiving.
Our banker said, don't do it.
No.
Don't do it. Like, it's not a good business because it's so stressful. It's very low margins. So my whole thought is like, people, if you go ahead and try doing a business like this, and you'll realize how much effort and work goes into it, and you will value that product so much more. Some of our best customers have always been people that have their own little farm. They recognize the value of all of the hard work that goes into producing it.
And I think that, and it's sad because, I mean, they had tried opening a processor in Hebron, and it got shut down because of the stigmata of it's going to stink, it's going to be dirt. Like, do you have any idea how clean some of those places have to be in order to process something in a way that's not going to get people sick?
I was actually a part of that.
Right.
And
I was so shocked. Like, why?
We did get approval. We did end up getting approval, but it took some time. And what happened was we couldn't find anybody that was willing to actually run the place.
Right.
And all of us that wanted to do it were already busy with our
Right.
farms and our jobs, and
it's an unforgiving job.
and then you start
To do that
talking
work.
to the people, you start looking. We were looking at the numbers, and the state comes and they created, like, the county college came up with a whole budget
Mhm.
and analysts and everything on it, and they were only budgeting like $12 an hour
That's
for labor.
impossible.
And it's like,
No way.
listen, people got to make a living.
You're not going to get somebody to come in and work a job like that.
Yeah.
You can't get anybody under the age of 30 to work in retail at a cash register
Yeah.
for $17 an hour.
I know.
You're going to get them to go
I
and
know.
process a live animal.
So, yeah, it was just it's
Yeah.
unfortunate right now. I mean, my hats go off to all of these
Yeah.
local processors right now, because
They're slammed.
they have more work than they could ever take on. They're having to cut back on how much they can process right now,
And they're still not making
because
millions.
they can't find
Yeah.
help.
Yeah.
Because people now were making $12, $14 an hour, whatever it was for them, and now they get
Yep.
an opportunity to go work for Amazon for $20 an
Mhm.
hour.
And not slaughter animals.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a much cleaner job.
Right.
So my whole thing is support these local
I know.
butchers, man. Like, they need the support. Don't complain when they raise their prices. Seriously.
That's what's so crazy. You talk about inflation, and on the big level, there's a lot of it, but then you expect everything for nothing from these local places. Like, well, I'm buying from local, so you don't have to ship it across the country, so why aren't you $10 cheaper than everybody else? And you're going, you kidding me? Like, I don't get to buy my grain by 17,000 truckloads, which brings the price down.
Right.
I don't have that luxury.
Mhm.
And the same with the processors. Like, I'm not sending there's I think who was it? They stopped buying their product and actually shut a plant down because they just opened and started their own business and their own plant. I forget what the product was. It might have been dairy and it might have been Walmart, but they just opened their own. Instead of buying it from somebody else, they said, let's just open our own. We already almost exclusively buy everything from them, so let's just open and produce our own, which means it shut down an entire plant somewhere. Because if you lose a contract like Walmart,
oh yeah,
then all of a sudden you've got 5,000 employees that now, unless you get another contract like Walmart or Amazon, you're toast. And that's one whole side of it that's gone.
Well, yeah, and going back to like what happened at the beginning of the pandemic with things shutting down, people recognized how fragile this food system is. It's very fragile.
Well, that's when I someone had made a comment and said, you love cooking and whatever. Sam's Club, I got a text message while I was at work, said Sam's Club just restocked their case if you want to go get food. I said, no, I'm good. I'm fine. Like, I got plenty of sources and worse. I mean, I know how to hunt. So push comes to shove, I'm going to shoot a squirrel, and I guarantee you I can make it taste better than you. I know a French way to cook a rabbit, and squirrel is pretty close, but that's it. It is. And I love that out of the darkness of this whole pandemic, it has shed this light on these local little micro economies of these farmers. And I think that some of the ones that are like you, that take that approach of a sustainable practice, much like Hefzibah Farm, same thing, to supplement some other things. They do farm tours and they do anything that they can.
Well, shout out
to get
to
things
them.
going.
I mean, Anita and her husband are amazing people. So, and they live right down the road from me. And that just shows you, I think, our attitude of
get out to your farm.
It's literally not about competition or anything. We just, it's all about the mission. It's all about the mission to help
the
feed
farms that care
more local community with a better quality.
So we got an announcement for your
yeah, you guys have been just chatting away. It's a great show. It's incredible.
We got plenty of time.
But we
got like an hour left.
He walks in and he says, "Hey, man, make sure that you get this out there for everybody."
So if you don't mind me sharing.
Not at
please
all.
do.
So
We're all
we
about
are
contests.
actually doing a giveaway, and it's $100 worth of meat, free delivery
From Wanda Farm.
You are welcome to come pick it up if you want, but we are going to do a giveaway for the month of June. So I'm going to actually release it early for everybody today. And so there will be a link in the show notes for you to sign up. And the other bonus you're going to get with it is when you sign up, I'm actually going to send you a virtual farm tour of our farm.
It's really
so
cool.
You'll actually get to see firsthand everything that's going on at the farm and how we raise our animals. And I'm going to explain a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, the differences between how we raise the animals and the effect on the environment and our health compared to what you might find in a factory farm.
And you can go to, I think it's wandafarm.net.
Yep.
And he's got a blog on there with some really good articles. And one of them I had mentioned a little bit ago about, the impact that commercial farming, especially in the cattle industry, has on the environment and the carbon footprint versus more sustainable practices of farming where the farm itself is its own ecosystem.
Yeah.
And the animals eat the grass, fertilize the grass, churn the grass, move the grass, and all of the, all the way down to the, it's much like my yard. My husband and I started slowly letting our yard go over to clover for that same purpose, because grass is not a sustainable thing.
No, it's not. And of course, you'll see up there on the screen right now, we've got it. We've shared the link out there. You just enter your first name and your email address. Now I had Kent at 216 the net. How many times can I enter? Can I enter like every day? I mean, does this increase?
You're gonna get 9 million.
It's going to be one time. If you did enter in multiple times, we would obviously
it's going to weed it out.
But yeah, this will be going on for the whole month of June here. So feel free to share it with friends or family.
We're going to share it out.
And get the word out.
And if you purchase $149 worth of goods from Wanda Farm, you throw in free delivery.
Locally.
Locally.
Yes,
right,
locally.
Yeah,
so if you're my listeners in Australia or Singapore, you're
Right.
not getting any beef from
Yes.
you're not getting any beef from Wanda Farm.
free.
Yeah, we have a shipping radius of basically we can do everything but the East Coast and from Colorado west. So
Right. So kind of Midwestish.
And it is on their website. So if you go to wandafarm.net, there's under their facts, you can actually see what their local delivery is. Which obviously I order half a cow at a time, so it's free delivery, shows up to my door. It's amazing. I have to say, real quick before we run out of time, the one part that I know a lot of, and I'm okay with the butcher wrap. I'm fine with the butcher wrap. But because of the fact that all of your meat is that vacuum sealed, and because the ground beef, because it's vacuum sealed flat, I can store more of it in my freezer and it thaws out so fast. I don't have to prepare for dinner. And I that alone, I'm sold on. Like the little flat pucks of 1 pound of ground beef instead of the tubes. I'm sold on that all day long just because of that. I'm lazy. What can I say?
Good to hear.
Yeah. I love it. I absolutely love it. But yeah, on the website, you can find all of the different facts about their delivering, their shipping radius, their delivery fees, what you can order. And I will tell you that, thankfully, one of the side blessings that we talked about the past hour is that with the pandemic, not only are the processing plants backed up, but a lot of you farmers are sold out. So you're sold through what you have now and you're selling out for more. So you need, it is a good idea to put a deposit in on what you want in advance and pick out, because I don't think a lot of people realize you can actually pick how your animal's processed, how thick your steaks are, how much you want. There's a lot more into it than just, pay me money and get your stuff.
Yeah. I will say though, we probably are going to be moving away from that.
That's okay.
Because it's
Get it while you can.
It's become quite a difficult thing to do with our butcher. And with that, right now with these butchers, like I said, they are so overwhelmed and short-staffed that we're just trying to make their job as easy as possible.
Easy.
Get it while you can.
I'm just letting people know we're still providing a quality product and everything, but
Still
we're moving
good.
away from some of the customization stuff to make life easier for
I didn't get what I
everyone.
want, and I was still okay with it. But so,
right.
as always, please follow us on YouTube. The more followers we have, the more luxuries we have. 216thenet.com, 216thenet Facebook, 216thenet YouTube, and of course myself, Mary, living low sodium on mylosolifestyle.com. And we will see you guys next week.
That is it.
I think we're out.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome. So you will be shared. All Gwen says, bummed I was. She says I was looking forward to my free delivery. I think she lives in Montana. I don't remember where she lives.